the main difference between an opioid and marijuana.
The opioids have a lot of side effects, unfortunately. And so what happens is to deal with that side effect, you're given another pharmaceutical and then another one. So we've heard this story over and over where I started with 2 pills, and before the end of it, I was taking 30 pills a day to get through life, but I wasn't experiencing life.
When you use medical cannabis, you've taken that power back. You're in control of your own body, and then you get to choose what you do. You're not a slave to the medication, because that's what I very much felt I was when I was taking all, especially for the PTSD and a lot of the SSRIs.
Let me ask you, today, what is something that you're grateful for?
The use of medical cannabis has changed my life. I can put my hand on my heart and say that, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to wake up in the morning and still be here when I have comrades who aren't.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, a podcast about growth, mindset, and entrepreneurship. I'm Moshe Popek, and today we discuss the pros and cons of legalizing marijuana. Joining us will be Ari Rosenzweig, the CFO of CannaConnect, a healing facility that provides medical marijuana for veterans. Their goal is to empower veterans with their own healing. We'll also chat with a veteran who serves as the Atlantic Canada manager for CannaConnect, and he'll speak about how marijuana is helping him and his fellow veterans on the healing journeys. Before we start the show, just a quick ask. If you enjoy Common Denominator, we'd be grateful if you'd like, comment, and subscribe wherever you watch or listen to this podcast. It helps promote the show, and it helps us get great guests. Thanks so much. Now, here's my conversation with Ari, followed by my conversation with Dennis. Hi, Ari, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Hi, thank you.
So, really impressed. I know you're coming out of Canada, and we love Canada here in America, but really impressed with the company you've built, CannaConnect. Tell us a little bit about.
Thank you. CannaConnect, we started back in 2015. I have 2 partners, and we were doing a company that was helping people get tax credits, but we had to work very closely with doctors. And at the time, they just rolled out this medical cannabis company in Canada, a program in Canada, and they allowed a few producers to have the license to be able to grow cannabis and only sell it to a end user who had a prescription from a doctor. So a doctor has to send the prescription into this company. They could then sell them cannabis. The issue was a lot of doctors didn't want to prescribe because it was early on. They were getting challenged by the college, so they're a little bit hesitant. So a friend of ours who was working at one of these companies came to us and said, hey, will your doctors work with us? And what we could do is give you a commission from the sales of those clients. And we said, oh, we'll talk to them. And they agreed to. And then they told us, by the way, the best thing you do for your business is go after the military veterans. Try to sign them up. Because under the current government at the time, they offered a military veteran that had PTSD or chronic pain that they could use medical marijuana versus opioids, and the government would pay for it. So they were good ordering, paid for by the government receivable. So we started, and we found our first veteran online, and we asked him to introduce us to a friend. We had our second and our third, and we were chasing 5 and 10, and then we started growing a little bit further, and we opened our first brick and mortar clinic where we had an actual physical location, which really we saw the big increase because a lot of the veterans wanted confidence in our company. So when they didn't need to come into our location, but they knew we had a location, it really helped us grow. And then the company really started to change because we saw what was happening. And a lot of these veterans were getting their lives back. A lot of them were on, you can hear stories. We have one of our key veterans, Dennis LeBlanc, who's going to join us. And he's going to tell you his story and the story of many others where they start using medical cannabis and they get control back of their lives. So instead of being on some sort of opioid or prescription, and lots of prescriptions that say, take this 3 times a day, and they now are given access to cannabis.
So let me just ask you, just so we understand, the main difference between an opioid and marijuana, what would you say is that shift as far as usage for the end user?
The opioids have a lot of side effects, unfortunately. And so what happens is to deal with that side effect, you're given another pharmaceutical and then another one. So we've heard this story over and over where I started with 2 pills, and before the end of it, I was taking 30 pills a day to get through life, but I wasn't experiencing life. I've heard this story many times where somebody says, you could have told me that I won the lottery that day, or you could have told me my mom passed away, God forbid, and it would have had the same effect, zero. So yes, I wasn't feeling the pain of PTSD, but I wasn't feeling life at all. But with cannabis, they were able to control the emotions of the downs, make it better. It was a Band-Aid. It doesn't really make it go away, but they were able to feel life again and feel the ups. And the main key to that was I really believe that they were able to control their own medicine. You gave the power back to the patient to say, hey, here's access to 5 grams a day of cannabis. You decide what you want to take. You want to take this during the day, that at night, this in the morning, whatever it is. And these are very resourceful people, remember. These are people that were able to go through the military program, go overseas, serve missions. They're empowered people that need the power back. And we watched a lot of people regain their lives. And then through our company, we also watched a lot of guys have purpose again. And I think that's really the big thing of what our company now provides. Although we're in the medical cannabis field, we provide purpose for veterans. And all these locations that we have now are these lounges where everybody has to help out. When we have a breakfast, you got to help out and cook and dishes and garbage. And we've really given the veteran community and these ex-military guys a community to live in again.
So the facilities is not just a dispensary. It's really a place like we are as we see it, humans. It's a place that we can gather. So as veterans that want to feel life again, want to be part of a community, and how many locations do you have now?
So we have 15 locations across the country. A lot of them are in military towns where veterans could afford to resettle after the military. So obviously not in the big cities where it's a bit too expensive, but it's across Canada. A lot of our clients are in the East Coast, which Dennis runs the entire operation there for us. But the locations, we actually don't touch the cannabis at all. The program never changed, meaning once we sign somebody up, they still need to call or go online with the producer they're signed up with, order from them. The producer sends it directly to the end user. In our locations, for the first day when you come in, you're going to speak to somebody who's going to teach you about cannabis a little bit, do all the paperwork to set up an appointment with a doctor, which you might see in person in the clinic or virtual. And then from there, it's all about education, programming, reasons to be part of our company. It's a safe place for veterans to hang out.
So with the brick and mortar, so what does that look? So there's food, you said, right? So there's food. Mm-hmm. There's is there like billiards and other things to do, and I guess maybe TVs and other jobs to be found there. In other words, to help people find jobs. I
don't know if you guys have in America the Legions, where basically veterans are allowed to go to these locations, and they used to have what we call beer, cigarettes, and darts.
Right.
So we changed it up a little bit. We have a green wall, as you'll see behind Dennis. We have coffee on all the time, so you get free access to coffee. Come sit down, have a coffee, let's talk. We have some little games of like some places have pool tables, ping pong tables. A few of them still have the darts back. The cigarettes are gone. We've replaced it with a little bit of cannabis outside if you need to. But it's not a lounge where you come and smoke and puff. There's no medicating inside any of our locations. Really, it's just become a safe place to hang out. But as you mentioned, there's opportunity. So if anybody who comes to our location and wants to get more involved, there's opportunity to get involved. Whether or not you want to pick a night of something you want to do, we have some guy wanted to start guitar night. Awesome. We gathered like 10, 12 guitars. Some veterans come in, they're learning the basics of guitars. You want to run your own breakfast, or you want to help out in the breakfast. You want to peer support. That's a big one. Hey, do you want to take on a guy who needs help? Pick him up. You guys meet at our clinic all the time and take him on. So we've created an environment where there's an opportunity to, again, take power back in your life, succeed, and help others, which is the best way to help yourself.
And then you're finding that over time, the patients are off all pharmaceuticals?
Correct. One of the highlights for me in this entire business was a moment where we had a doctor who was working with us who needed the money, and that's why he started working with us. But he started seeing patients, and after about 6 months, he called me. He's like, I can't believe it. He goes, when these guys started with me and they told me all the pharmaceuticals they're on, and now 6 months later, they're like, oh yeah, I don't take that anymore. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, I'm off it. I just stopped it all. And he's like, I've never seen anywhere outside of a program where there's cannabis where people can get off these heavy-duty pharmaceuticals.
Well, I'll tell you something. Right, so that's super interesting because that's the framework of what's going on in Canada. In America, so if people don't know, right, so the federal government still like listed as like a level 1 drug, which is pretty up there on the federal level.
Yeah.
Many states have some sort of medical marijuana is allowed, even here in Florida. But we have now on the ballot, it's Amendment 3. So they've got, in order to have an amendment on the ballot come in a few weeks from now, or November 5th when we vote, it's going to be part of the Constitution that recreational marijuana will be allowed. But there's two nuances to it. One, very, very little regulation of where and how to smoke.
Yeah.
And then also the dispensaries will have no liability as well. What's your general take on, I definitely see, and I've heard a lot of people have great benefits from medical marijuana. What's your take on recreational marijuana?
So we got to watch that progress. We were in the business when it was just medically legal, and we watched Canada open up recreational marijuana. So we saw how it progressed. There's a lot of upsides. One is the stigma. There's a lot of people that could use medical cannabis instead of opioids, but they're afraid of, it's a Schedule I drug in America. I don't want to, especially guys that were military, they don't want to break the laws. They followed them all. So it becomes an issue. Now it's nice to see the stigma come down and the safety to use medical marijuana. So you had a lot of people jump on and start using this as a medication. The other nice thing was there was a lot of resources around the industry. At the beginning, there wasn't that much money. The companies were doing maybe a couple $1 million a month in sales. There was no money for studies. So all of a sudden, there's a lot more money that came in, and the industry gets a little bit of a hype. And with hype gets more education for the mass public to know that this is not the devil drug we were told as kids, the gateway drug, but it actually could really help you if help is needed.
By the way, I just want to mention on that point, because that was something that I was thinking. You mentioned as a gateway drug. So your personal feeling is that marijuana, because that was always what we were told.
Yeah.
Just in general, you don't believe that it could be a gateway drug.
Right. It could be, because if anything abused could lead to the next thing. Alcohol could be a gateway drug.
Sure.
Marijuana could be a gateway drug.
I see that with ayahuasca. I see it with ketamine.
Correct.
Right. So it just depends. I guess you have to look within yourself. Do you have an addictive personality?
Correct.
Right.
Gambling could be a gateway drug too, to be honest.
Sure.
Yeah.
We all have some addiction. That's my belief. So, yeah.
So watching that progress, in terms of, I was raising young kids in Canada with this legalization, and my take on it was that any kid in Canada, probably America too, and a teenager that wanted to use cannabis, they were going to find it. They're going to go meet the guy behind the building and give him cash, and he gives you a bag. You don't even know what's in it. They're going to find it anyways. If they're going to do it, I'd rather them buy it from a government-regulated situation where I know there's no pesticides or whatever it is. I know that they'll know the exact amount of THC in this cannabis. And one of the most common things I've seen throughout our history in the company is that a lot of people end up lowering the THC level as they use more cannabis. So meaning first you get into it, you said, oh my God, medical grade cannabis, could you give me 26%, 32%? And they start using that. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, let me try 22%. And then let me try 18. And I've seen them go down and down. And right now some of the companies make strains that have 2%, 3% THC. And guys are loving it because they're like, I just needed to take the edge off. I didn't realize I need to go all the way into the couch zone. But I just needed to relax a little, and now I could be functional in society. So there's an advantage to a government-regulated program where they have to put, in Canada, you have to put to 2 decimal places how much THC, 26.72% THC, and you can control whatever your addiction is, but you can control what you're taking and slowly lower it down to manageable levels.
The thing that really sticks out of my mind is just the, which people don't know, is that, again, that limit of liability. I'm not a big fan of that, right? So you can just act grossly negligent as a company,
right?
Why is it fair that they should have, again, from the legal perspective?
Would they have regulations on the way they grow it, or you could just do whatever you want?
There are, but it's very limited. I'm sure they had really professional lawyers write the amendment. But that's, it could be, again, if alcohol is allowed, right?
Yeah.
If gambling is allowed, maybe marijuana should be allowed. But, amongst those boxes, there's a lot of regulation. I know here in Florida, sports betting, for example, it's only allowed, for instance, the Seminole tribe.
Yeah.
in all of, and then even with them is a lot of regulation behind it. So, I just don't think something like that, which could have the possibility of deep addiction, should be free for all.
Right.
And stuck in the Constitution, which is hard to. Again, that's the other thing. Once it's in the Constitution, it's extremely hard to get the law changed.
Right. So first of all, as a Canadian, when we look down on, look at America, we have a lot of faults. But one of the things we kind of always laugh on is that you sue for everything, right?
That's
liability. They're like, wait, we can't sue you? Hold on a second. What are we going to do? How are we going to make a living? So it depends. We're talking about the liability, meaning if there is mold in the product and a guy gets sick because of the mold, yeah, I'd like to see there be some liability. But if a guy goes to a store, gets cannabis, and then crashes his car because he smoked and wasn't capable of driving, there shouldn't be any liability on the store because they sold him the cannabis. So I'd like to see some regulation on what they can grow, how they grow it, what the consumer is going to consume. But as a Canadian, again, I would just, if there was no liability of what happens after you consume this, because you're a grown person who's responsible for your own actions, then I'm okay with that part.
Right. So no, that's interesting because I speak to other people also in Europe, and litigation is frowned upon, and maybe it's like 5% compared to the U.S. The U.S. is litigation happy. I'm a recovering attorney myself, so I definitely know that.
Keep up the good work.
I want to thank you so much, Ari. I'm gonna link up now with Dennis, your partner in crime and veteran as well.
If I could say one last thing before we go, I said the highlight of this whole business, the key to the whole business for me, and the most exciting part is the fact that the veteran community has welcomed us. This is one of the greatest communities in Canada. They have each other's back, literally in war and in peace and in friendship and in love. And it's been a give back relationship with them, and they've really welcomed us. And I feel brotherhood with all of them. And Dennis is one of my closest friends now, and we work together. And it's just a beautiful community, and you're going to see that shortly.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe it's 10% of all veterans live in Florida. Right. So we also have a very big veteran community. But just also one more point was, I don't know this. I know you said the government pays for the medical marijuana. I don't know if Medicaid or Medicare, I don't know in America that they pay because, again, it's a Schedule I drug. I don't think they do.
From my understanding, the VA is a federal program. It would require federal approval.
It would require. So I don't think so. So that's advancing. You're saying that it's working, right? Being funded by the government. So it's interesting. Yeah. It's definitely an interesting perspective. Welcome, Dennis. Really appreciate you coming on the show. I just had your good friend Ari with us, and speaks very highly of you. And it's super fascinating because in the U.S. it's kind of really split as far as medical marijuana is more like 75% of Americans believe in that medical marijuana should be. Recreational marijuana is a different thing, and kind of seems almost like split as far as their view. But I want to talk first about you're a veteran and you served in the Canadian military. Tell us about that service a little bit.
Well, I started right out of high school, much like kids in Canada and the U.S., and had very much wanted to make it a career. Obviously, I joined in the 90s, so I didn't think there was much going on. Bosnia was kind of wrapping up, and, little hot pockets here and there. And then the 2000s came, obviously 9/11, which changed the world for us in the Western world. And then everything ramped up with Iraq and Afghanistan, which I had spent almost 2 years over there myself, 2 different tours. And I had proceeded through the ranks, but on my tours, I ended up with some injuries, both mental and physically, and then ended up ending my career a little short, which I had signed a contract till 2033, but I had only opportunity to do 20 years, but I had accomplished a lot within that. But with that, it left me broken and without purpose. When you take your passion, like I said, you call yourself a recovering lawyer. Well, I'm a recovering soldier at the time, so you're left with a an open space that you really don't know what to do because it's wide open. And obviously then you add on some physical issues, chronic pain and post-traumatic stress disorder, and trying to deal with that. And then finding out, like, in the military, you know exactly who you are. Like, I was Captain Dennis LeBlanc. I knew where I fit in things. And then all of a sudden the pin's pulled and, you're back home and, you're myself, a father of four, but, I didn't know where I was and how I fit in. And then I was at the time taking copious amounts of pills just to get through my life. So at one point in time, I was at 21 pills a day post my career. And, I was lost. I, didn't know where to go. And I was dead set against cannabis, like, prior to my use. Yes, sometimes I did drink alcohol, but cannabis was never a thought in my mind. And it was actually my wife who said, hey, they have new medical cannabis out for veterans. It was a company that started here in Oromocto that prior to CannaConnect. And I got introduced to it. And then shortly after, I switched to CannaConnect and kind of found my rhythm, and, purpose gave me purpose back again. And eventually, with the doctor's help, I took those 22 pills now down to 2 pills a day, and then manage it with the medical cannabis. Wow. So that's kind of a speedy version of what happened.
And how did you originally connect with Ari and CannaConnect?
Well, it's quite funny. I got to tell you this story. Is I had started doing events after I got my head clear. I volunteered for Veterans Affairs, so I'm actually the co-chair of policy for the Minister of Veterans Affairs. So I advise her on policy. And with that, I would hold veterans events in little town hall meetings and just try and get veterans out. So I had met Ari through a companion of ours, and they were actually sponsoring some small events for me. When I first had a conversation with Ari, kind of the first interview, I guess, to start working with cannabis, he didn't hire me. So you can, you'll have a laugh at that. A couple months later, I got more involved, and they gave me the opportunity to use my leadership skills that I learned in the military. And I started off managing one clinic in Oromocto, and then we expanded to Nova Scotia. We had it at St. John's office. Now I have 5 clinics under my belt on the East Coast. And we've almost tripled our numbers since 2019.
That's really, really amazing. Tell me, so your wife tells you, try some cannabis. Hesitant. How was that initial, as you started with cannabis? How was that journey, as far as going? You said you had 21 different drugs, and went down to 2. How long did that take? What was that transition like?
That transition probably took about 12 to 18 months to kind of do it. Like, I did it with the doctor's guidance. And then obviously at the same time is trying to figure out what cannabis worked for me, like whether I inhaled it, smoked it, vape, or took it through tinctures, through oil and capsules. And then trying to find a balance of that, and then actually find the right dosage for myself. So the beauty with medical cannabis is that you know what the dosage is. So you can actually use it as a medicine. So, for example, like, you take an extra strength Tylenol. Well, I know the equivalent of that with cannabis. So I can use that to manage my symptoms. So, but it's something that, it does take a doctor to kind of wean you off the other pills and then bring it back up, much like anything else. But what it did was I started to feel more. So I know Ari had mentioned, like, that's one of the things, is like I couldn't feel anything. I was just numb. And then eventually you start to feel a little bit better. So then, wow, hey, I actually feel like I can leave the house. And then you start going back to the gym. It's funny, I was always a fit guy, the alpha, top everything, tried to do. And then I lost that for a couple of years when I got out. And then now I'm at 48 years old. I'm probably the best shape that I've been in my life. Just because that transition, and the transition into medical cannabis was not just the medical cannabis itself. It actually showed me how I can live a life of wellness and mindfulness. So that's the one thing that CannaConnect does. I would say separates us from the odds, because we don't just preach, here's your medicine, go off on your own. We give you the opportunities through yoga, physical training, and those are different programs that we offer at the clinics that, we've evolved over the years and that I've taken up myself. So I started off with just yoga, and then I started with some meditation, and now it's part of my life. So I have 30 minutes in the morning of a daily routine, which is I look after myself first thing and prepare myself for the day. What that has done for me is given me purpose again to get back into how do I say it? Service after service. So it's now giving me the power to get back to my brothers and sisters that are still, fighting the fight and may need help later on, or getting out and get that fight. So with that, it's a snowball effect, but a snowball effect of wellness. And I couldn't see myself doing it if I did not use medical cannabis. Now, for myself, I'm a huge CBD user. I only use a little bit of THC at night just to help me sleep, but that works for me. I know other of my comrades, they'll use a little bit, whatever it takes. But an example would be a couple of years ago, I couldn't even go to the mall with my kids and go shopping. And I mean, my children are teenagers now, but they were quite young when I retired. And it was a bit of a burden for my wife, and I'd have to take pills to go in. And then I realized, like, okay, well, I'll take the equivalent on the medical cannabis. And then once you get it down pat, it's like you're good for the day. So again, that had helped me in my family life, my own personal goals, and then even for my own business, brought me into an industry that I didn't think I belonged. I thought I was an imposter, but actually this is exactly where I need to be.
Are there any side effects that you have from the medical cannabis?
None.
That's amazing. I mean, it's interesting because we do know, right? You just take a critical thinking of pharmaceuticals, right? First of all, it's not controlled medical, unless maybe in Canada it is. Does the pharmaceutical industry control medical cannabis, or
no?
They don't, right? So, but the pills they do, right? So the
100% they do,
right? So it's interesting that because in America the pharmaceutical industry is the number one lobby in America. So it's $10 billion a year of lobbying for the pharmaceuticals. So I always ask this question: if pharmaceuticals are good, and we know, which they say it on the packaging and in the commercials, that they have many, many side effects. So if the pills are good, if they are good, why do pharmaceutical companies need to spend $10 billion a year? For what purpose? If it's good. I mean, that's just starting question where I start on my journey.
If you think of it, it's like they'll give you one pill to fix one thing, and then it's like, okay, well, this is going to increase your blood pressure, so you need to take this pill. Oh, your blood pressure is now monitored, but you sweat a lot, you're going to have to take this pill. So it just steamrolls, and you keep adding on to deal with an issue that could have been handled at the lower level. So that it's for profit. Like they don't want you to get better. But what I'm saying is that when you use medical cannabis, you've taken that power back. You're in control of your own body, and then you get to choose what you do. You're not a I don't want to say it, but a slave to the medication, because that's what I very much felt I was when I was taking especially for the PTSD and a lot of the SSRIs, right? And then pharmaceutical companies actually, in my opinion, don't want you to be well, because then they're not going to make any profit.
Yeah, we're even seeing, my wife mentioned to me, it was really strange, and I'm a big advocate of everybody being a critical thinker. Like, in other words, there's so much information. There's this side, there's that side, and then there's the truth. So empowering people to make their own decisions. That's the bottom line. So I don't tell people what they should do or shouldn't do. The show is hopefully giving tools from the guest's life experience, my life experience, and then we bring that out. And you must be so proud to see the veterans that you work with and the clients that come in. how it changes their lives. Is there one or two stories that really stick out in your mind of friends or family that were hesitant also with medical cannabis and now their life has completely changed?
Well, I can say one of my best friends and one of my top guys that works for me in Nova Scotia had come on board. He was with the RCMP, which is kind of the FBI would be the equivalent in Canada, and he was very hesitant on what we were doing, the whole medical cannabis. He had seen a sign and drove by. This was about 2 years ago, our Sackville location, and kind of stopped in to see what it was about. From that, and then his just continuing and him working with me has come out of his shell, has doing a lot more for the community, and actually now works hand in hand with me on multiple projects and has become, a real asset for the company, a great friend to myself and a great friend to Ari and his partners. And it's just amazing to see, like, he was someone that you would see on the couch that would not leave the house. And now he's everywhere. So if I can't be in a spot, he'll go in lieu. And I mean, that's just one of one. I can probably sit here all day. And if I think back, hundreds of people that it has changed their lives so much. And now we're giving back to the community again. So again, service after service is what I like to say it is. There's so many of us, and we're actually hopefully waiting in anticipation that the U.S. VAC will get on board, and that we can help and guide our counterparts in the U.S. Because I know much of my career I've worked with the Marines in Afghanistan and Haiti and a few other entities, and there's nothing more that we'd like to see and share our experiences with that.
Yeah, that really would be special to actually make sustainable, long-term positive difference in people's lives, for sure.
That's it.
Right. What's your take on a thought on recreational marijuana? Should it be regulated? How much? Should it be legal? Just your thought on that.
So to start, I think definitely it should be legal. Let's call it what it can be a vice if you use it that way, if it's for entertainment and to that. But it definitely needs to be regulated. It should fall under the same regulations as alcohol and tobacco. Just because it could harm the user if it's not regulated properly and with government oversight and managing that. But also I do see that if it is regulated properly, there is, some monetary values for, I'm not sure how those taxes work quite in Florida, but I'm sure there is some monetary that can go back into the community. And that's something that we have seen here in Canada. Each of the provinces kind of manage their own, and it's taken a few years, but in New Brunswick, myself, the province where I live, we've actually seen a profit turn. The cannabis stores here are run by the provincial government in much like an alcohol store would you would go pick up beer and wine and spirits. They have it, it's called Cannabis MB. So that model seems to work well. Myself having young children and that are now teenagers, that was always a concern for me.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're going to try what they want. For the medical cannabis piece, for the longest time, it was kind of hidden. And then as they grew and they saw like how I was healing and they asked questions why I was, and then I kind of introduced them and showed them what I do and how I use the medical cannabis there. But they do very much know the difference between the medical and the rec side. So like this stuff is like, Dad needs this. If you want to try something else, where I have some older teenagers that, I said, listen, like if you're going to do that, like make sure that it comes from the store. Mm-hmm. It's legit. It's not like you can't buy something off the street. And with all the different drugs out there now, like fentanyl and carfentanil being mixed in, I mean, it's just not safe. So I think it is like regulation is good. Legalization is good, but it must be regulated. It definitely has to be regulated.
Yeah, and then what I was talking with Ari before is the awareness, this Amendment 3, it's coming up in a few weeks in Florida. It's going to be going into the Constitution. Very, very slim regulation and very little, if not at all, liability for the manufacturers and dispensaries. So, it's a big lobby. We have True Leaf is probably 40% of the market in Florida, and I know, they're spending millions and millions of dollars to lobby for it. So maybe something different than once in the Constitution in Florida, it's very hard to change that. But Dennis, let me ask you today, what is something that you're grateful for?
I'm grateful that CannaConnect actually exists. I am. It gives me purpose every day, and the use of medical cannabis has changed my life. I can put my hand on my heart and say that, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to wake up in the morning and still be here when I have comrades who aren't. So that's
nice.
what I'm always grateful for every day.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dennis, and also again, thank you to Ari. How can people learn more about CannaConnect?
You can go on our website, which is www.cannaconnect.ca, and you'll the minute you Google it, it'll come up, and then you'll see the various locations. You can get a hold of them through the head office or the info line on the website.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis. It's really been great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Take care. Have a blessed day.
You too. You too. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ari and Dennis. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, we'd be grateful for a like, share, and subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, feel free to leave a rating or review. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.